name is Alden MacDonald. I'm the executive chef here at Northern Michigan University, and today we're going to make a vegetable jambalaya. So jambalaya starts with a few very key ingredients that you can find in a lot of Cajun and Creole cooking, which is your trinity: onion, pepper, and celery. A lot of other soups that you find will often have onion, celery, and carrot, but when you're doing Cajun and Creole cooking, they swapped it out for bell peppers, which for where the cuisine comes from makes perfect sense, because these grow very well in the South, as do tomatoes. But anyway, so we're gonna start with that. The first thing we have to do though is we have to heat up our oil. Whenever we're sauteing vegetables in a pan, it's important we start with hot oil so that our vegetables don't get mushy. Instead, they just saute really nicely and release their moisture well. So we're gonna put some oil here in our pan. We're gonna make sure it's on. And then we can start cutting. Okay, so we're gonna start with our onion. I'm gonna show you really quickly how to cut an onion appropriately. And this is important because for safety and also for consistency. Whenever you're cutting up a vegetable, you want to make sure that the veggies are all cut up in approximately the same size so that they cook at the same rate. For something like this, you want the vegetables to look a little bit more uniform as well if you're presenting the dish and you care about the way it looks. I do, because I'm a chef. And so whenever I do that, I want to cut my onion a certain way, and I'm going to show you how to do that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the tip of the onion off. Then we're going to turn it over. And where the roots are, we want to cut the roots off, but not the core. So we're going to cut that off. And notice our core is still intact. And that's a very important part of what we're doing here today. I'll move these over. We're just going to cut this in half. Now we have a nice flat surface to work with. We never want to cut our vegetables on a wobbly surface. That's not safe for our fingers. We're going to peel the outside off. With your onions, you always want to make sure you're peeling off just enough, but don't peel all of it off. But here, I want to show you, this is still really dried out, and it shows a little bit of sign of decay, so we want to peel that off. Although one half of this little peel looks like it's just fine, that doesn't, so we're going to get rid of that. We're going to do the same thing with this one here. Just peel her off. There we go. Now we have nice clean onions to work with. If your peels are really fresh and nice and clean, you can also use these peels for things like vegetable stock, chicken stock, and other things. They help with color and flavor as well, because those skins actually still pack a lot of flavor, because at one point those skins were just as tender as this onion right here. So just a little tip there that we like to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all hold my knife correctly. Forefinger goes here and thumb goes here. I pinch it, it's called a pinch grip, and then I wrap my fingers around. This gives me control. It gives me the most strength. When we point, this actually weakens our grip, and you're straining your tendons in your wrist. So this can actually cause you some pain and carpal tunnel syndrome, or not syndrome, but symptoms at some point in time. So we want to pinch, wrap, and that's how we hold our knife. Our left hand, we want to curl our fingers over and keep our thumb behind our fingers so that we're not cutting the tips of our fingers. When you go like this, you create opportunity to cut yourself, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to remove that opportunity. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife and move my cutting board to the edge of the table, and I'm going to move this back and let the knife do all the work. Back, but not all the way through. Back, but not all the way through. Notice I'm keeping my fingers up at the top so that I have the least amount of opportunity to cut myself as possible. For the sake of efficiency, we're going to do the same thing here. Back, but not all the way through. Back, but not all the way through. Now we're going to do it the other way. I'm going to take the tip of our knife, run it back, but not all the way through. And I want to keep these cuts as uniform as possible. Pick the size that you want your onions or peppers or whatever to be, and stick with it. Does it have to be perfect? No. But is it nice to be perfect? Yes. Okay, so now we're going to cut this way. So we've cut it this way, we've cut it this way, and now we're going to do our last cuts here. And they create nice, beautiful, diced onion. This last one didn't cut all the way through, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a little help. I just have a little bit left. I don't want to be wasteful, so I'm going to cut that off. If I wanted to be really particular, I wouldn't use the end, but I would rather use every bit of my food that I can and throw as little of it away as possible. Here we go. Great. So one thing I want to show you is, if you can see it, is my oil is very hot and it's smoking a little. And the reason that matters, if that happens and it's smoking, it might be a little too hot. If you're cooking on electricity at home, just pull it straight off, turn your burner down, and let this cool off so it's not smoking anymore, and then put it back on your cooled down burner. When you're cooking on electric, it will not cool off quickly. I'm on gas, so I just turn it down. It's immediate. Okay, so I'm gonna go here. And I've got the rest of my onion there. I'm gonna go ahead and hear that nice sizzle. That's what we wanna hear. Into my pan. Boop. And then when we're building flavor, like we are with something like jambalaya that takes a little time, one of the first things we want to do is add a little salt to our vegetable. That salt's going to help draw out some of the moisture in the vegetables and start building flavor. Now, as you see, I'm popping this. You don't have to. You can use a spoon. That'll work. I could stir with a spoon. As a chef, I prefer to saute my items. If you want to get good at this, what you do is get a small saute pan and a piece of bread. Trust me, that's what I used to do when I practiced when I was younger, is a piece of bread. If you can flip a piece of bread over without it falling out of your pan, you can do that. These pans are specifically designed to be able to flip your food that way so that you're not actually putting utensils in your food. You can, but you don't have to. The next thing I'm going to do is cut up my celery. This has already been washed. Make sure you wash your celery. That's very important. Vegetables are grown in the dirt. Wash them. And if you see little buggies, that's okay. Just remove them. If you're getting vegetables out of your backyard, I knocked my bay leaves over. If you're getting vegetables out of your backyard or for someone's backyard or from the farmer's market or whatnot, one thing I like to do is, if it hasn't been washed, is I like to soak my vegetables in ice water with salt. So I dissolve a bunch of salt in the water so it's nice and salty water, then put ice in there, and then I soak my vegetables. What that does is, if there's any little bugs or eggs or anything hanging out in the cracks and crevices of your vegetables, then that will kill those quickly but not affect the quality of your produce. So it's a little trick that you can have for your home garden or from your friend's garden or whatever. I have a lot of friends and we trade things, so. Okay, I'm just cutting my celery up here. I want to do approximately the same size as I did my onions. Notice I'm using the tip of my knife and cutting away from my hand. Do not cut towards your hand. The only time you do that is when you're doing the onion at the very top, but you want to cut away, keep the blade, side of the blade away from your hand whenever possible. So all I did was just cut these into strips to make them about the same size. And I just chop it up. Notice too that I'm not doing this. No, don't do that. No. You're going to keep the tip of your blade on your cutting board, and it's a motion like this, okay? And what that does is it creates the control you need to be able to chop your vegetables quickly and efficiently. It's also a lot quieter. You can also dull your blade a lot quicker if you chop that way. Okay, so celery's done in the pan. Ta-da! I'm going to turn this up just a little now. Now that I actually have vegetables in here. Okay. And I just mix it together by popping it. I got a little overzealous there, but there we go. Now, the next thing we're going to do is our pepper. Let me show you how to do our pepper. I'm going to start here at the top, slice down. Then I'm going to start at the bottom, slice. I make a nice flat surface with my pepper. This is all perfectly edible, so we do not throw that away. We're going to use it. We're just going to use that here in a moment. Put my scraps over here. So, in here, you have ribs. Boop, boop, boop. The ribs have pith. That's that white stuff, and that's what gives you the bitterness for when you're cooking with a pepper or eating a fresh pepper. So we want to get rid of that because I don't want that bitterness in my jambalaya. So I'm going to look for one of these flaps. I'm going to cut along right beside the flap, and notice it creates a little space right here. I'm going to put my knife in that space. And I'm going to cut down, and then I watch my knife as it cuts through those white ribs as close to the flesh as I can get it as safely. And then I bring it around, and then your whole core comes out, and then you don't have to deal with all the seeds like picking it out of the pepper. And that's really helpful. It's quick, efficient, and it greatly reduces your mess. Okay, I'm going to cut this in half, and now I have two nice usable pieces. As you can see, I have a little bit of white left, so I'm going to go ahead, move my thumb so I don't cut myself, and get some of that off of there. This has a little bit more, I think it's probably, we'll just do a little bit. There we go. Now, I'm going to flip these over. If your knives are nice and sharp, you can just cut them skin side up. If your knives are not as sharp, cut them skin side down so that they don't, your knife will kind of skip on that skin. Be careful, that's very dangerous. A sharp knife is safer than a dull knife, much safer. So you want to make sure that you keep your knives nice and sharp if you can. Boop, boop, boop. I like to line my peppers up like this when I'm cutting them, as I can let the pepper be the pepper. It naturally will curve, so I'm just going to let it naturally curve and not fight it. There we go. As you can see, it's about the same size as my celery and my onions. I'm going to do the same thing here. You can also cut your pepper this way and get strips this way, but honestly, I'm just being a little, I don't know if you want to call it lazy or efficient, but if I do it this way, it all just falls naturally, and then I can just chop it up. If I were being very particular, I would cut it the other way, but when I'm cooking for my family, that's good. So, I'll throw my peppers in there, like so. I'm going to toss this like this. Now, if you see that you're starting to get some browning, which I am not, but if you see that you're getting browning, that means your heat's too high. So you want to turn that heat down just a little bit because you want your onions to become translucent, which means they're kind of see-through. They lose some of that white color. But you don't want them to actually brown. That's not the point of cooking the vegetables. The point of cooking the vegetables is to soften them. So this real quick, it's not going to be as pretty, but I'm just going to cut strips. They're about the same width because that's all usable. Then I turn it and do it the same. This won't be as pretty. If you want to be really particular, then save these for your morning omelet. Don't put them in your jambalaya. I like my vegetables really chunky as long as they're about the same size. I actually like the look of the nice chunky kind of rustic vegetable. Great, so that's working. Now we're gonna cut up our chili, and I wanna talk about this because I've got gloves. So even at my house, I keep a box of gloves around. You can buy them at a local store. You can get them online. I would encourage anyone who's going to be working with a lot of chilies or anything that has a lot of spice to invest in a box of gloves. And the reason why is because chilies are spicy. What makes chilies spicy, chef? Well, it's capsaicin, and capsaicin is what embeds in your tongue or other grooves in your skin, and that's what gives you that spicy sensation. That's also will give you the spicy sensation on your nose, on your eyes, if you touch yourself accidentally on your face while you're cooking and you are not wearing gloves. Also, it will embed in your skin for a while, even if you wash your hands. So whenever I'm dealing with nice spicy peppers, I always glove up. So I'm going to cut this in half. And again, we want to try to preserve as much of the pepper as possible, so I only cut a little bit off the very top. I'm going to cut this again. So it's got all these seeds. I'm just going to scoop them out. You can do this with a spoon or something. I just use them with my fingers because guess what? I have gloves on. So I'm just going to scoop that out into my little compost pile I have over here. I mean, you can cook with the seeds, but they're spicy and bitter. Whew. So with the chili, I want to cut this up a little bit smaller than I would my other vegetables because I don't personally find it very pleasant to chomp into a huge piece of spicy pepper. So for this, we're just going to cut real thin strips. Notice my fingers are curled. That's important. Curled fingers. so I'm not chopping my fingers off. There we go. And then I just turn it, and I've got these nice long julienne strips, and I'm just going to cut those really small. Now, one thing to note is this recipe does call for fresh garlic. I do have it. I just already chopped it up. A lot of times what I do is I'll get 2 or 3 heads of garlic, and I will actually chop those heads of garlic up all at the same time, and then I will put them in a baggie or a container with a little bit of salt, and I'll store it in my freezer. And then that way, whenever I need garlic, I just scoop out a little bit or break off a little piece of that garlic, and then I always have fresh chopped garlic that didn't come from a little container with the sludgy garlic juice, which honestly I'll use in soups and stuff sometimes, but it's better. So as soon as you're done with your pepper, take your gloves off, because anything you touch with your peppery gloves will then have pepper on them. So I don't want to touch my handle with my peppery gloves. So I'm going to mix this in. Oh, I got a little color. So I'm going to turn that down because I don't want a lot of color. Also, another thing that I do is if I want, say that this is a hotter side of the pan, I'll actually go like this, and that will cause the veggies to kind of rotate in the pan. There we go. So that's cooking. Now I want to toast my spices. Whenever you're doing something with a lot of spices, you want to make sure to toast them. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just toss in. I've got bay. I have some oregano. I have garlic. Granulated garlic? Yes, garlic on garlic. It's a good thing. I've got some smoked paprika. The recipe calls for regular paprika, but I got to tell you, me and smoked paprika, we're like best friends. I use it all the time. Then I've got thyme, my chopped garlic, and then I do have Worcestershire sauce. If you want to keep this vegetarian, Worcestershire sauce does have fish in it. So if you want to keep it vegetarian, just use soy sauce. At home, I use a product called Yondu, and it's actually a fermented soy, and it tastes almost exactly like a Worcestershire sauce. And I have replaced all of my fish sauce and Worcestershire sauce recipes with Yondu at home. So there's a free plug for Yondu. All right, so then I'm going to just saute this, mix that in. And this is about the time that I am going to bring in my spoon, because you're getting quite a lot of stuff in your pan, and you get to a certain point with these one pan dishes that it does not make sense to pop it around anymore, because it's just going to start to pop out of your pan. Okay, so all of that's done. Next, we're going to do tomatoes, and then we're going to add our rice and our stock and just let it cook. So I always cut the top off, because everything around the top is usable. And then I cut. We want these nice and chunky, because after we're done cooking, we still want to see some of these chunks. So tomatoes will kind of disintegrate into whatever you're cooking, because they're very watery. And I don't want that to happen completely. So I want these chunks to be bigger than my other chunks, okay? As you can see. If you notice, I'm instituting some of the same practices that I cut this way, turned it over, then I cut this way, and now I'm cutting this way. You have to be a little more ginger with your tomatoes so they don't fall apart. But right into the pan. We want those tomatoes to release their juices. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, if it's January and the tomatoes taste like cardboard, I don't want to use those, spend a lot of money on those tomatoes. You're right, you shouldn't. Don't spend a lot of money on those tomatoes. Buy canned. It's okay. It's better. Canned tomatoes are picked at the peak of their ripeness. Then they are preserved at the peak of their ripeness. Therefore, they are going to have way more flavor and taste way better than the hothouse tomatoes that you would get in January that have been shipped 2,000 miles to get to a grocery store in Upper Peninsula, Michigan. So don't do that. Buy the canned tomatoes and use them instead. You can get diced, you can get chopped, you can get the whole ones and chop them up yourself, whatever you prefer. But I always do that in the wintertime. I will go in months without purchasing tomatoes, because what's the point if they don't look good? These are still early season tomatoes, and you can tell, because see, look how pale they are inside. I'm spoiled, and I have a mother who has a huge garden, and she will give me lots of lovely tomatoes. Okay, so then the tops here, and this is kind of messy, so we're going to go cold to hot here in a second to pick up this whole cutting board to put into our pot, our tomatoes. So this, I just cut a grid, and the center goes over here, and the rest goes over there. This tomato's a little bigger, so I'm going to cut 2 on that side. But again, center, boop. So we're going to take this. Again, cold to hot. We don't want to take our hot pan and move it around with the things that could burn you. If you can't do this, that's fine. At home, I use a bench scraper. They don't cost very much money, and they're very useful. And the bench scraper is great because it acts like a shovel. You just take the whole thing, go whoop, and dump it in wherever you're going. Okay, so we're just going to mix this in, and we're going to cook this for just a few minutes while the tomatoes warm up and start to release some of their juices. Once they release their juices, you're going to add your rice. That's 3/4 cup of rice. I'm going to turn that heat up a little because this can really, you can hear it. I like to toast my rice for a few minutes in the pan with the spices, with the tomatoes to kind of start seasoning, get some of, whenever you toast a starch, that actually gives it that nice nutty flavor. So I'll do that with my rice in there for a couple minutes. Just let it, you can hear it singing. And then I've got a veg stock, and I'm just going to pour that on there. And then you're just going to let this come to a simmer. If your pan's real hot, that will take sometimes less than a minute. Already the edges are simmering here. You can also start with hot water, and that's perfectly okay. And we're going to cook this for about 20 to 25 minutes. At home, what I like to do for a dish like this is I like to cover it for about the first 10 or 15 minutes to ensure that my rice is soaking up all that moisture. Once the rice is mostly done, I'll take the lid off so that the rest of the moisture evaporates and we're left with a nice rice dish that's you can scoop out. And I'm going to show you right now what that looks like. I'm going to move that over. So this is what it'll look like when you're done. Notice the tomatoes have floated to the top. You have your bay leaves. You see your seasoning, and your rice is all cooked. We're going to take this. You want to pick your bay leaves out because although they're not going to hurt you, they're unpleasant to eat. Then I've got my spoon here, and as you can see, I've got nice rice underneath cooked, and that'll just go in here. Now, you can add all kinds of things to this dish. You could add some shrimp in the last 5 or so minutes of cooking. You just put your shrimp in there. You could do a little, say you have a leftover rotisserie chicken. Who has leftover rotisserie chicken? Some people do. I don't, but some people do. You could shred that up, put it in the last 5 minutes or so, and that would be really delicious. Say you've got a little piece of like leftover some sausage from a dinner the other night or something. That would go great. Grilled brats cut up, put in there in the last 5 minutes or so, delicious. So there's lots of things you can add to this dish, or like some fried tofu or something. All these things you can add to this, and it will just add flavor to this dish and round it out. So this is your vegetable jambalaya. Enjoy.